Just to get started, one thing I want to show you, this was actually taken this morning. So this was out at our farm. Again, like Chad said, we live in Spanish Fork, but you can see here, our cows were not necessarily too happy. And if you look at these calves over here, these Bali calves, these two were actually born probably 2 or 3 days ago, and I don't think they were loving the snow very much. But you can see, I mean, it's just crazy how weather hits us. And anyway, so one of the things I really wanted to kind of focus, so let's see on the chat what we got. So we got beef cattle, nothing yet. There's some people hoping. Chicken, cows, bees, horses. Looks good. Okay, chickens. We got a lot of chickens in there. So, okay, well, one of the things I wanted to just point out before I get going, I have scenarios for two different animals, and I did meat rabbits and chickens just because they're a little bit more small scale and I'm familiar with them. But I'm hoping the principles I talked to you about today can apply to anything that you're doing. They should be able to, just talking about applying budgets. One of the things I really hope to intersect as I talk to you today is to intersect the animal science side, or kind of that production side, and how we fit it into either a budget or in kind of our financial situations in these operations. So one of the things I want to start out pointing out is, what do you think when you're thinking budgets, right? You know, a lot of people, when they hear the word budget, it just makes them run. They don't want to do it. I know in my life in the past, budget, when I heard the word budget, all I felt like it was a restraint. It was holding me back. It was something that I had to restrain myself on. And, you know, it's been interesting over the years as I've kind of worked more with budgets in agriculture as well as in just my own life. One of the things I found is budgets actually are an amazing tool that we can utilize. Now, the hard part is, I think everyone, when they start out on a budget, they start out by being like, hey, I'm going to set up this budget and I'm going to follow it this month. And usually what happens either in the first month or the first year that they're following the budget, it just fails. The budget doesn't match up. You have weird circumstances, random things that are happening. And so it ruins your budget. And people are just like, well, I'm not going to mess with this if I'm just going to keep ruining my budget. You know what I mean? And so that's one of the things I think is important that I have realized over time is we start to put budgets in and we start to watch our costs and our income and kind of look at where our money is going. A lot of times that can actually free us up. At first, we look at it as a restriction. However, budgets over time, as you interact with them and as you continue to adjust them, they become the only word I can think of is a freeing thing, because they allow you to see your money in a more accurate term. And so that's one of the things I think. A budget is almost like a living document that becomes more precise the more you use it. And so that's one thing I think is important to understand, is that your budget's probably not going to be right the first time, especially if you're just starting new into animals. Yeah, I can almost guarantee it looks great on paper, but it doesn't always fit right on paper. But as you get going, you get more precise, you understand some of the wastage, different things like that, your budgets get better. Now, talking about the best marketing tool, a lot of people want to know, what's the best way that we can market? Well, I firmly believe the best marketing tool that we have is understanding what our cost of production is. Now, you guys might be thinking that's not marketing, but to me, understanding the cost of production tells us a lot about how we should market and where, what type of markets we should approach. I think a lot of times we get the cart before the horse. I just think, people who are looking to start in agriculture, start in either small scale, large scale, I think they're like, hey, I'm going to have a product and it's going to sell. Sometimes you got to get the market going first to be able to sell. So when we're looking at cost of production, one of the things that we want to focus on is how much it's costing us to produce at $1 per rate, right? And so usually what I look at is whatever rate you're selling at. So let's say, for example, you have eggs. You're not going to necessarily look at dollar per egg unless you're selling it that way. You might be looking more at $1 per dozen of eggs. Or for instance, you might have cattle that you're selling. You might be looking at dollars per head, or you might be looking at dollars per pound if you want to be a little bit more precise on it. And so there's a lot of different options we can go with cost of production, and that's up to you. You can go as far as deep as you want into it or not. And so I think that's one place that you got to start. Now, before we do that, we got to understand, what is profit. I think most of you already understand this. Profit is our gross revenue minus our total costs. Now, our gross revenue overall is our price per unit times our total units. So if we're getting $1 per pound and we sell 1,000 pounds, we got $1,000, and that's our gross revenue. Now, this is really simplistic. Again, I'm going to tell you these budgets, it's really going to be a simplistic thing, but overall, I do think that it's important to remember these things. So gross revenue minus our total costs. Now, when we look at total costs, what we're looking at is two different things that we're going to kind of add together. And it's our variable costs and our fixed costs. And so those are kind of the two that we're really going to focus on. And honestly, our costs are divided into either one of those sections. So first, to understand our variable costs. So variable costs, they're expenses that vary without output within a production period and result from the use of purchased inputs and owned assets. Okay, that sounds like a mouthful, right? It's just a big mouthful. The way I like to remember variable costs is that they are the result from the use of purchase inputs and owned assets. So for example, here's a rabbit, right? One of the things that we're going to be putting into that rabbit is livestock feed. And so in order to be able to get our rabbit input to get production out of it, we have to put feed into it, correct? And so feed's going to be a variable cost. Now, we might also have tractors, let's say, that are working the property. Your fuel, your oil, your repairs, those are all going to be variable costs. And so you can see really quickly, another example that I like is your crops. If you're looking at crops, your fertilizer is that variable cost, because as you put more fertilizer on, or as you get more cropland, you need to put more fertilizer on. And so that cost is variable depending on the amount of assets and whatnot. Now, if we're going to look at fixed costs, they're a little bit different. They're expenses that do not vary with yields and are a result of owning assets. So I think this one, the best one to describe this one is depreciation, right? You own an asset and every year it depreciates a little bit, right? And that's just a fixed cost that's going to come in. Also, our taxes. We own the land, we own the asset, but that land is taxed and it's just a fixed cost that's going to come out. Some of the other things we look at sometimes with fixed costs is we look into kind of purchasing land. That can be another area for us to utilize fixed costs. So I've got an activity for you, and I'm going to give you about 30 seconds here. I want you to look over these 5 different sections I have here, and I want you to just go real quick and say, basically look, are they variable or fixed? Okay, so just take a second, look over these. Okay, so in the chat, I'm going to tell you what I did here. There's one fixed cost, and in the chat, I want you to put in what the fixed cost is. And you guys can guess. And there is a little wiggle room with variable and fixed costs according to how your operation is run. There can sometimes be some that kind of go one way or the other, but overall, there should be one that kind of sticks out. Let me see if I can pull up the chat here. Okay, looks like you guys got it. Insurance. I'm seeing all insurance there, so great job. And that is the case. Let's see, my slide's not moving. There we go. That is the case. We can see that, insurance is the fixed cost there. Bedding is going to be variable. Marketing costs are going to be variable. Veterinarian costs, fuel. I think you guys got that pretty well. So in this next section, I actually want to go through budgets, and I kind of want to cover this, and I'm going to just go through scenarios, and I'm going to kind of run through them with you, and you guys can kind of go and see what you think on this. So first of all, I'm going to go over meat rabbits. So to start out, we're going to look at variable costs. Okay. So I put new livestock in as a variable cost just due to the fact that livestock over time, you might be, changing them out, different things like that. You might have to cull. So usually you get a trio when you buy meat rabbits. And so we get 2 trios, which are 4 does, $2. That's $175. Now that's a pretty good deal that I put in here. It's usually probably a little bit more, but it gives you a general idea. Next is our feed. So we're looking at rabbit pellet, and I'm doing this period for a year. Okay, so we're looking at $280 of rabbit pellet. Now, one of the important parts to remember when you're considering feed costs, and this is true with all of your costs, is to always add in wastage. I think they figure a lot of times there's about a 5% wastage with feed. And so a lot of times you might look up online, you might find the percentage of intake that your animal's gonna Do I know, like, for instance, cattle are 2.5 to 3%, and you might think, oh yeah, not, perfect, I can feed this much. Make sure that that wastage is in there because it just happens in general. Now, if we're looking at veterinarian costs, we'll do a Pastorella vaccination for our breeding animals. So it's about $1 to $2 per animal. So I went the $2 route. So that's $12 total. And so that's what we're looking at overall with variable costs. We have $467. Now, I'm going to be honest with you guys. This is a really simple budget. This doesn't entail what would actually probably go into buying everything for market rabbits, but it's a start. Now, if we're looking at fixed costs, starting with housing, we look for 6 cages, $20 a cage, that's 120 bucks. 4 nest boxes for each of the does, we're adding another $40. That could be a little bit higher. Equipment, feeders and waters, we're looking at about 75 bucks. So our total fixed cost is $235. Okay, and so now we have our variable and fixed costs. So that means we can get our total costs. So we combine those two together, and basically we get our total cost of $702. Now, that, to me, getting this total cost number is a huge step for anyone. I think one of the problems that we sometimes get into is, I know with some of our agriculture, sometimes it becomes a hobby. It's hard to border the line of hobby and business. And one of the things we forget to do is that in the total cost, because we're using our regular work or our regular job to pay for the deficit that we might be fighting in our agriculture operation. So having $702 in total cost, that lets us know a lot of information right there. So again, this is over a period of a year. That can seem pretty expensive overall. Now, the next part and the next thing we need to gather is our expected yield. And this is really where our animal science background comes in, is because we have to know our production system. We have to understand what yield we're going to get and kind of the different steps on it. And so I don't know how many of you are familiar with meat rabbits, but here's some information for you, and I'll just go through it here a little bit quickly. But you have a 1-month gestation. So basically they have 1 month from conception until birth. You have 1 month to weaning. So you got another 4 weeks where the doe is with the kits. And then you have another month, and this might not be true for everyone, but there's another month for rest. And so that allows the doe to recover and be able to get back into the system and be able to get ready to be able to breed again. So overall, we have a 3-month breeding cycle. Now, our average with our meat rabbits is 7 kits per litter. And so our expected yield, if we're thinking about this, we're going to think that each doe is going to have about 4 litters per year, and there's 4 does. So total, we're going to have 16 litters per year, or 112 kits. And again, this is all based on averages. It's not necessarily realistic, but it's what the average is. So that gives us an idea where to start. Now, when we're looking at rabbits, the rabbits usually sell at 5 pounds and pretty dang close to being right at 5 pounds. If you're under that, you actually get dinged because it doesn't reach your premium. And if you go too far over that, you also get dinged. So there's this really nice range there, about right around 5 pounds. Now, with the market where it's at, they're at about $2.20 a pound. Okay, so this is a lot of information on our expected yield. Now, one of the things is you could have stopped here when you were looking at our expected yield at 112 kits, and that could have been a stopping point for you. However, I wanted to take it a step further and look at our total pounds. So I wanted to look specifically at the pound. So at 112 kits, where we had 5 pounds per kit, we're going to get about 560 pounds of rabbit to sell. Okay, so I mean, that's pretty good. That's a pretty good mark to look at. That is a great number to have, as it gives us our expected yield number. Now, you guys might be asking, why is it important that we have expected yield? And it's because of some of the equations that we run. First of all, we have 2 different equations we do for a break-even analysis. This first one is our break-even price. This is also our cost of production. So I want you to remember that. This is what it costs us to be able to produce a pound. And so if we look, all we do is we take our total cost here and divide it by our expected yield. So up here we have our total cost, $702. We divide that by our expected yield. And what does that give us? about $1.26 per pound. Okay, so if any of you remember, our price that we're selling at is $2.20 a pound, correct? So that's a good sign. Our cost of production is lower than what we're selling our animals for, and we always want to see that. So now the other way, and I really like to do it this way, this is actually my favorite equation to use, is the break-even yield. It allows me to know, due to my costs, how much yield I'm going to need to be able to break even. Okay, so what we do is we take our total costs and divide by the expected price. So we know our total costs again are up here, $702. We divide that by our $2.20 a pound, and that gives us 319 pounds. And so I took this back where that would be at 5 pounds per kit or per baby rabbit. That's going to be 64 kits. And then that's actually, if we stick with our 7 average, 7 per litter, that's going to be about 10 litters, a little under 10 litters, but that's where it puts us. Now, this number is great because it tells us where we need to break even, except one of the things I think we need to avoid is we can make this our goal, but I don't think it's a great idea to make our break even yield our goal, right? We want to make money. And so if we want to make money, we need to make sure that our goal's higher than this. And that's one reason I love this information right here, this break-even yield, is because it allows us to be able to set goals for ourselves and our production. And we got to understand that we need to set our goals above this, but it allows us to know where we're at specifically. Now, one of the things I want you to consider, so projections are not guaranteed. I'll be honest, I gave some really fluff cost, fluff information, not necessarily the nitty-gritty details. You know, when we're looking at projections, I remember when we were first, me and my wife were first looking at meat rabbits, one of the things we were looking at is, well, what is the price going to be? And, you know, you always, when you're first looking, you got big dreams, really big dreams, right? Now, a couple things to think about, projections are not guaranteed. First of all, your costs can change. Feed costs this last year have changed so much that it really is going to change. It could change over the year, right? So you might have some changes to make there with your budget. You also might, you know, the ideal situation is that you're going to have a litter every 3 months. Is that necessarily going to happen? It might not. For instance, right now, I have does that are sitting and they're late. They're supposed to have babies either today or yesterday, and they're late. And I'm really worried that none of them are pregnant. And I probably shouldn't give you all the information of my failings here. But again, it doesn't always work perfectly. There are some things that interfere. And that's where your budgets come in big, is after you do this year after year, that's how your budgets can become more precise, because you see where things went wrong and you can fix them. And then it allows you to be able to be better prepared to expect, you know, changes in cost, changes in price, different things like that. And so again, economics, a lot of times there's a lot of projections. They're not always perfect and they're not guaranteed. Now, they're a great tool that can help us get guided, but just remember there's always something that's going on there, especially when we're talking livestock. Now, I'm going to give you a second scenario here, and I'm going to have you fill out, in the end, I want you to fill out the break-even price and the break-even yield. Okay, and so me and my wife are looking to get into chickens. Now, I will be honest with you, we're not looking to do this for a business necessarily. This is just something that we're looking to do. My wife likes different breeds of animals. We're looking to get into lavender Orpingtons that are pictured here. So kind of a unique chicken here. Anyway, so we're looking at variable costs. We look at the feed, $385, new livestock, 10 chickens for $130. Okay, so that's kind of more of expensive end. These birds are a little bit rare. So the fixed cost, $400, a chicken coop at $375, feeders and waters at $25. Now, you chicken people, I know you might be saying my numbers are not anywhere near what they were for you or anything. I hope you don't think I'm saying that. I'm just providing numbers to be able to show you the equation. So don't think I'm saying this is what cost should be at all. So our total cost, if we look over the year, and this is really expensive, I'll be honest, is $919. Okay, so now if we're looking at our expected yield, multi-purpose breed, and again, this is kind of an ideal situation, is to get 180 eggs per hen per year. So what we'd be looking at is about 1,800 eggs per year from 10 hens. That's 150 dozen of eggs, basically. Now, let me ask you guys this. You chicken owners are probably smiling at me. Will we get this many eggs our first year? yeah, we will not get our eggs this first year. We're going to be raising chicks, right? And we're going to be getting them to hens. And honestly, I don't know if you guys have seen how crazy it's going right now, but with the way hens are going and just selling, it's getting a little crazy. And so it's hard to get chicks in the first place. So break-even analysis. What is my break-even price per dozen eggs? What is my break-even yield at $4 a dozen? Okay, so I'm going to give you just a couple seconds here. You guys can maybe fill this out. Here's the equations. Go for it. You can put them in the chat if you want or not. We might have to go a little bit quicker here, but I think this is a great practice to do so that you can understand that. And remember, total cost, expected yield are up here. Okay, just due to time, I'm actually going to move along here. So break-even price, again, equals the total cost divided by the expected yield. So $919 divided by 150 dozen. It looks like we need to get $6.13 per dozen eggs. Now I set that price at $4, so I'm not doing well. However, I know that $4 isn't necessarily the right price. I've heard that people have even been getting up to $12 a dozen. I think that might be a little high, but I have heard, there's prices all over the place. Now, if we look at our expected yield off that $4 per dozen, we need to get 230 dozen. So we need to find a way to increase our overall production to be able to make ends meet. So anyway, one of the last things I wanted to share, enterprise budgets, they're coming soon. There's a grad student who's working up on them at Utah State. They're going to provide enterprise budgets for small scale. And so whether you're doing beef, sheep, rabbits, chickens, anything, bees even, they might be able to get one in there. They're going to have an enterprise budget that will have some costs and income, just so you can be able to put in the numbers easier for your operation. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and end. So.
Hey, great job, Jacob. Very informative. I'm not going to tell you how much it cost me to build my chicken coop for that budget. But I think Orpingtons are a good call. That's what my flock is. So we'll have to team up. So as far as questions, you do have a couple questions. The first question being from an individual who has a small semi-permaculture operation with variety of animals, cows, chickens, horses, sheep. The biggest challenge is deciding what are the essentials for a starter under a year operation.
Can you repeat that last part of it again?
So it says the biggest challenge is deciding what are the essentials for a starter under a year operation. So, I guess that goes back to maybe knowing your production system, right?
Yeah, and I think there's some great resources, whether it's from USU Extension or from another extension, where they really go into detail on what to expect to get started. I think those are really important areas that you kind of have to do your research on the animal production system itself. It does get really tricky, and I appreciate this question because it gets really tricky when you have multiple animals. And some people like to separate the animals into their own separate expense and whatnot. And sometimes that's what you have to do, is kind of put them individually. But if you have any questions specifically about getting started, my email's right there. And I think I can put it in the chat. But just please, you can send me an email and I can kind of send you resources. I can also just talk you through it as well. So.
Right. Another one is, what market do you sell your rabbits or meat to?
So there's a couple different markets that are actually open. Some of the markets that I've seen, so there's one that's mainly human consumption, and it's been going in and out just due to different things that have been going on. The $2.20 a pound, that is human consumption, and they're pretty specific about the weights of their rabbits. There are, however, other people as well who look into more of the dog food area and different things like that. They don't pay quite as well as the human consumption, but they'll accept your rabbits at a wider range of weights. And so anyway, if again, you can email me. There's some Facebook groups that they talk about when people are coming through to gather rabbits. And that's been one of the best ways that we've been able to find it. I'll be honest, Facebook groups can be a great way to find markets. And I think that's been one of the best things for us personally.